Okay. All right. Thank you. So you may see me like looking what looks like looking at you, and then I'll look away, but it's because I have two screens going on. It's just the way of the world these days. Um, so first, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you wanting to learn more about us. I'll quick introduce Kristen. She's our development and operations manager here at Desert Voices. And she also has a daughter that attends Desert Voices as a hearing peer. That is something, um, is a benefit that we provide our team members. And so Kristen will be able to give you a little insight from a parent perspective, which will be nice. And then we have Nancy Stern here, who has worked with us for many years on the grants and development side as well. So um, please interrupt me at any time if you have a question. I can get going, get excited about what we do, and so if something isn't clear or you want me to elaborate on something, please don't hesitate to say, "Time out, I have a question."
Right.
Um, so, Desert Voices, what are we? What do we do? Um, our we worked a lot over the summer on what our why is. We wanted to be very clear with our team and our community partners and our parents about what is Desert Voices and why are we here. So we believe in an oral option for children with hearing loss or are deaf, and we want to provide them equal access to a lifetime of learning. So, our philosophy here is that each child, each family that wants their child to communicate in the hearing and speaking world should have an opportunity to be educated in that way. Um, and we work really hard as a team with community partners, professionals, and the parents to get kids ready to mainstream by the time kindergarten, sometimes first grade. So we're working to close the gap because they have not had access to sound and they are not learning to speak in the normal fashion that our hearing children are. So they are at a deficit, and so we're here to close that for them so that they can go into that mainstream and compete with their hearing peers with as few obstacles as possible. So the key to what we do here is one, early intervention, getting to those kids as young as possible, making sure they're amplified right away and that they have good access to sound because you can't learn to speak if you can't hear. So that's super important. And the next key part is parent involvement. They are an important part of the team. The children only spend a small amount of their day with us. And so it's really important that parents understand the importance of them being really their child's best teacher and to carry over all the things that we're doing here into the home. Uh, so we also believe in intensive services and direct instruction. So many of our children who have typical hearing are picking up language by just being around it. But that is not how kids who are deaf and hard of hearing learn to speak. They need to have direct language instruction. So we're going to take a peek into what actually goes on in the classroom because that's what I think is really exciting and what is fun to see. So we're first going to look inside a parent coaching session. That is the first step in our program here.
Oh, right into your belly. Oh, I get you. Oh, I got you. Let me take that one back. Okay, well, I'll take this. One for you and one for me. Okay, we'll share. Should we do it again? Okay, are you ready? Austin. Oh, good looking. It goes right into your belly. Oh, I get you. Oh, I don't know which one I want.
So this is parent coaching. This is a one-on-one session. You see the child there. The parent or a caregiver is also involved, and then our listening and spoken language professional. This is Tracy is leading this session. You don't see or hear the child saying anything, but at this point, she was just trying. She was working with the child to get them to alert to sound, to recognize that there's sound going on in their environment and to look and acknowledge that there is sound there. So in parent coaching, we're working on those first foundational listening and communication skills, both with the child and the parent. Again, so the parent, because they're only with us an hour a week. So there's lots of other hours in the week where they're at home with family. And so we want the families to really understand what a rich listening and speaking environment is. What it really boils down to is you're a narrator all day with your children, um, pointing out sounds, pointing out items, and saying what those items are. While you're playing with them, just constant talking. So they're exposed to all those words and phrases. And so the cost of this, this is not what families typically pay, but the cost of these sessions are $120 an hour. We do provide scholarships to all of our families because we do not want um, cost to be a barrier to this education. So we work very hard with fundraising and foundations and grants to help us fund those scholarships for these families. And then from the professional point of view, this is a diagnostic period because we have also found that probably 80+% of children who are born deaf and hard of hearing have additional needs or challenges. So that's why we call it a diagnostic period, because there may be other things coming to light that also need to be addressed as early as possible. Those could be things like fine and gross motor skills that need to be addressed, or sensory, they're sensory seeking or they're sensory avoidant. You may start to see attention things going on. And so we want to be in constant communication with our team, additional professionals, and the family about what else do we need to address, because those can be barriers to learning to listen and talk. And so we want to address those so that we can make as much progress as we can. Our goal is to make more than a year's progress in a year's time. That's the only way we'll be able to close the gap for these families and these children. So then our next step is Jump Start. And so we're going to take a look at what goes on in a Jump Start class.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life but a dream. We can ask Sophia, can we go fast? All right, go fast. Let's go fast, Dominic. We still get to have dreams. So where are your hands? Gentle hands when we go fast. We go fast. Ready? Yeah. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
So this is our Jump Start class. You see that family members are still involved, but now we have multiple kids in the classroom. We try and keep it down to about 4 kids, a caregiver, and then 2 listening and spoken language professionals. This is still a diagnostic time because now they're in a classroom with a group. So additional barriers or needs can start to come to light when you put children in a classroom with other kids. And so again, we want to be transparent and open with our families, talking about what challenges their specific student might have and how do we start to address those in this classroom and at home, so that when they go to the next step where it's just the kids and the professionals in the classroom, there's the parents or caregivers are not in the classroom to help support. So we're always looking to set each child up for success when they go into a classroom. So they're building their vocabulary bank in parent coaching, and now in Jumpstart, they're starting to figure out sharing, playing side by side with other children. And again, we're continuing to build that foundation of language. This class happens alongside parent coaching. So now the families would be coming on site twice a week. They would still have their individual session for an hour, and then they're in Jumpstart for 2 hours. So now their direct instruction is up to 3 hours a week. And typically around 18 months or so is when this class is added for the family. And it is $150 an hour. And again, we do scholarship families. I should tell you the range is usually typically 10%. The families pay 10%, $15 up to about 90%. But on average, our families are paying some in the 10 to 20% range for the services. And what our professionals are doing is they're taking in all this data and information, and they're really being thoughtful about the educational plan for each child. When are they ready to take the next step into a classroom? What kinds of supports will we need to have in that classroom? What professionals need to be involved in that team as the child progresses through the program. So then our next step is going to be the toddler class, where kiddos typically are around age 2.
So Deanne, do you ever so I know you have certain ages. Oh, sorry. I'll watch this.
We'll get through this and then.
Okay.
What do you want, Julian? Julian, do you want shoes or eyes? Oh, eyes. Do you want the eyes, Julian? Do you want the eyes? Or the shoes? Hey, what do you want? Do you want the eyes or the shoes? Oh, the shoes! You want the shoes? Look, oh, push the shoes in the Play-Doh. Ready? Look. Push. Walk, walk, walk. That's so.
Yes.
So cute, first of all. This is making my day to see these little ones. I was just curious if, so it sounds like you have for each level, you have a certain age you like to see them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever run into situations where maybe folks haven't heard about your program until their children are maybe 3 years old or 4 years old? And then do you have something different, or does it start back?
Absolutely. Sadly, I think I don't see an end to when kids might be identified late, when there were maybe some family barriers for that being identified late, or they're unable to get amplified as quickly, or they were not able to have consistent services. So we do always have a group of kids every school year who are older and have very little language. And so probably 2 years ago, we made an adjustment to have every family start in parent coaching, that 1 hour a week session, because what we were finding is if we put them directly into the preschool, there's a lot of knowledge and background information that the parents didn't have in order to support the needs of their child at home. So the education of the family is just as important as the education for the children. So we now start everybody in parent coaching. We get some foundations for the family. We start to figure out if there are other barriers for that child, help the family find professionals to address those, so that in tandem, we're all working together in order to get the child into the preschool, which starts around age 3. for a while, we would put 3-year-olds in the toddler class with 2-year-olds, and that just wasn't ideal for either age of the kids. They just developmentally, that's a big age gap at that time. Their language might be the same, but the way they play, their interests, their frustration level as they get older and don't have language. So it was not serving all those students very well. And so we now keep kids in the toddler class at about age 2. Those older kids will do some parent coaching. And what we started in earnest this year is what we're calling a P1 classroom. And that is older kids, low language, but the actual classroom looks a lot like a toddler classroom. So our toddlers are in class 3.5 hours a day, twice a week with a listening professional. And it's all very much play-based. They stay in that classroom. They don't go to other classrooms. And it's tons of repetition. So they have to hear everything over and over and over and over again. So they may stay with a theme. Let's say the theme is farm. They may practice farm for 6 weeks. So they're hearing tons of words related to farm for 6 weeks. So we're doing the same thing in our P1 classroom. They're staying with one professional. The themes are longer, not 6 weeks, but maybe 3 weeks. And they're getting lots of turns to practice listening and talking. So we definitely have made adjustments for those kids that don't follow the typical path that we always hope to see, because we just know those kids are out there. So we do have kids enter at age 3 and 4 with pretty low language. Unfortunately, we are not set up to accept those 5-year-olds because they're possibly 5 years behind. And if we're going to do more than a year's growth in a year's time, we probably need at least 3 to 4 years with them. And now we've got 5-year-olds and possibly an 8-year-old, and it's much more difficult to differentiate teaching to those different age groups. Believe me, we have families every year that ask us, can you go to 3rd grade? Can you go to high school? I mean,
I'm sure.
we do create a pretty safe environment here that parents get super used to, and it's hard for them to say goodbye.
And Deanne, I'll add to that from a parent standpoint. I started in parent coaching with my daughter, Harper. And like what Deanne said in the beginning, our whole philosophy at Desert Voices is to lay this foundation for these families. So when we get these 3-year-olds and we were sending them into a toddler or a preschool, they didn't have the tools. We're basically building a parent's toolbox. So if we're sending them to preschool and asking them to build a house, but they don't have any tools to build that house, it's really hard for them to truly understand what Desert Voices is doing and for them to carry over that at home. So with parent coaching, working with Tracy, she, gave me my first tool. She gave me my hammer to put in my toolbox and started to teach me these tools then to carry over to our other family members of that repetition of that basic play that even though Harper was my second child, it's a very different mindset that you have to get yourself into. And so the professionals are basically giving these parents their tools of how to repeat things on a daily. I mean, just brushing your teeth or getting milk out of the refrigerator is a pretty typical thing you do on a daily basis, but you're now having to narrate that. And that's very foreign to a lot of parents. And so without the parent coaching and the Jumpstart, you don't really have those tools to know what to do. So it definitely is a progression. And so, again, starting back at that parent coaching, we have found very valuable to all of our families.
I have a quick question. Do you find, obviously you're extremely, I feel like most parents would be more than willing to do it. Do you find that's the case? I mean, 100%, just people are all in?
Mm.
Or is there sometimes that people, the time, I would imagine the time and the mental part of that is draining. So
It's exhausting.
yeah, I bet.
Kristen
I
will just
couldn't
throw
even
it out.
imagine.
It's exhausting, and Harper didn't have a hearing loss, but she was speech delayed. She didn't start talking until she was over 2. So I had to approach it as if she had a hearing loss because I was having to make up for lost time. And it's exhausting. And being in
can't
the
even imagine.
classroom is exhausting. And so I would say not everyone buys in 100%. They may
Mhm.
understand it, but to really buy in and make it a part of your daily routine is very hard for some of these parents and caretakers, because sometimes it's not the parent, it's the grandma, who might be older. And so asking, an older grandparent to really narrate and play, it's hard. It's hard.
Mhm.
I would
I bet.
also add that most families honestly are going through some type of grieving process.
Mhm.
95% of children born with hearing loss are born to 2 hearing parents. So these families had no idea that this was even in the realm of possibility. And so we often hear that some of their first sessions will be a lot of processing what has happened and um, giving them the hope that your your child's future can still look exactly the way you had dreamt it to be. There's some work up front, and we're going to help you through that. But we'll have calls where parents say, "Do I have to teach my child ASL? Am I going to have to teach them ASL? Am I going to have educational choices? Is my child going to be able to play sports? Is my child going to be able to go to college?" And we're here to say, yes, all of that can happen. But again, we're going to do some work up front. So it's a roller coaster ride for them here, and everybody grieves differently, and everybody moves through it at a different pace. So,
And
yeah.
how do they find you?
So, couple different ways. One, some families in the age of Google, some families are just immediately on the computer. My child is deaf. What do I do? So they may find us that way. The number of pediatric audiologists in the Valley is quite small, and they all know about us, so they may hear about it through their audiologist.
Okay.
And then probably 4 years ago now, we actually were able to win a contract with Arizona State School for the Deaf and Blind. And so that is the first contact families usually have. And so they know about us, they'll talk about us, they'll suggest to their families if they're interested in listening on spoken language to come and tour with us. And we're an added service along with ASTB. So up until about 4 years ago, that agency didn't even acknowledge us. They were heavily geared towards ASL and didn't offer services like ours. So that was a big win for us to be able to break into that agency and get referrals that way. So, and then just having our families out in the public. You don't see a lot of kids who are deaf and hard of hearing with hearing aids and cochlear implants. So as a parent, as you're out in the public and you see one, they are often running to that family saying, "Look, my kid too. What are you doing? Let's talk about it." So just word of mouth is good as well. So that's how they get to us.
So do some of your families, are some of them expected to pay and others aren't? How do you guys work that process?
Yeah,
Is it an application process or?
Yeah, so it's a financial aid application process through a third party. We do not process it. We let the third party know like what is tuition, and they gather all that information from families, and they give us what the family is capable of paying. And so we do a sliding scale. So the minimum amount a family will or a family can pay 10% of these fees up to about 90%. And most of our families are at the lower end. We also work with families on other potential scholarships that go directly to them to help, because it's not just our services. The devices are expensive. Pediatric hearing aids are not covered by insurance. So that's all an out-of-pocket expense.
That's interesting. How come?
That's insane.
It
Yeah.
is insane. It is insane. Many people are working to change that, but they have not been successful yet. Cochlear implants can be covered by private insurance, but not hearing aids. Or the batteries that these things chew through are not covered, and they're quite expensive. And then the audiologists, they're going early on when first amplified, they're going to the audiologist a minimum of every 3 months. And our kids, until they mainstream, are either going every 3 months, every 6 months, or at least once a year. So
And so no part of what your services do would be considered like a typical physical therapy or occupational therapy.
correct.
It's kind of all additional services that are not covered
Exactly.
as part of your medical diagnosis.
We do that parent coaching. Some of those are provided by a speech language pathologist.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that can be covered by insurance. But that also can be a huge battle, because we know best practice is to see that child at least once a week. Oftentimes, insurance will say, we'll approve 20 hours a year. And that's just not enough to do what we need to do.
Is your process in that regard, though, to go after whatever money is available as far as insurance and stuff, and then fill in the gaps?
Right. So we, for a while, were using insurance to try and recoup some dollars. We found that we were spending more money trying to recoup small amounts of money. So it's $20 or $120 an hour, and we were getting, insurance would pay $20 of that. And we had to go to each insurance company and ask to be a provider. Some would say yes, some would say no.
Yeah.
So it was outside of our expertise, and so we decided a better use of our time was to try and find scholarship dollars for our families. So one of those scholarships is AG Bell. And they provide, parents can apply each year, and depending on the age of their child and the hearing loss level of their child, they may be awarded anywhere from $500 to like $2,000 to help with those additional type services. But they have to have a high enough hearing loss to be eligible. So there's still those kids that may have like a mild loss, and they're wearing hearing aids, and they're not eligible for that scholarship. So we definitely work with families trying to find money to fill in the gaps as much as we can.
Sure. So. And how many total students do you have right now?
Right now, Kristen, are we at 30?
31.
31. Okay. 31. So we're low right now. Our highest has been at about 70 across all programs. We definitely saw a dip with COVID because there's a lot of appointments in the beginning when first identified. Everything was shut down. This was not considered a necessity. And so there has been a gap of those kids. We are starting to see it pick up. Being diagnosed, getting amplified, working through the system. we were a little afraid that there would just be this onslaught of kids coming out of COVID, but that hasn't happened yet. It has been a pretty gradual trickle to see our referrals and tours start to pick up. So we're hopeful that we'll continue to see that enrollment grow because we know the kids are out there.
Right.
We just have to find them, or we have to help them find us. Yeah.
That sounds good.
So, Kristen, you had an aha moment in toddler class with Harper. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I remember specifically dropping Harper off one day, and the listening professional at the time, Miss Ginger, she just sat down and started to play with us. And it was just a simple explanation of, kind of like what Miss Kendall was doing in the video of you're having a simple activity and pushing, you're playing with the Play-Doh, but it's that repetitive. And I don't think I truly got it until I was in the moment playing of, the red car goes up the slide, and that's a simple phrase, but you're adding, the red car goes up the slide, then the red car goes down the slide, and then the red car, goes over here. And it's like within a matter of 1 minute, you just repeated one word 6 times. And so it really didn't dawn on me until I was able to observe in that moment what was really happening.
Yeah, so that is the toddler class. It's the repetition. You saw Kendall also asking, do you want the shoes or the eyes? And the child went to grab for one of them, and she was like, nope, you got to at least try to say what you want. And then when he finally indicated shoes, like, she said shoes, I don't know how many times, but we heard shoes a lot. shoes. So and the toddler class is all about play. Like, the kids do not know they're there to work that hard to listen and talk. They're there playing with Play-Doh, doing their thing. So it's very play-based. I'm not sure if I said this, but it's 2 days a week, 3.5 hours. Yeah.
Do you guys find, it's probably too early to tell, but even, us hearing, it's so much harder to understand someone with a mask on. So I would imagine, just looking, these kids can't see visually like their mouths. I would imagine that sets you all back a little bit if you found that.
Definitely at the beginning of COVID, that was definitely a concern. We feel very, very fortunate that we won a grant at the end of last school year that allowed us to put in a direct microphone system. So what that means is the teacher is wearing a microphone around her neck, and the sound Bluetooth directly to the child's devices.
Wow. Interesting.
And then you can see behind Kendall, there's like that tall silver cylinder thing. That is also a microphone in the classroom. So everything is amplified in order to help with that. Now, when masks come off, still really amazing because they're still going to get that direct sound to their devices.
That's
so
great.
we were all floored and super excited that we got.
I bet.
We're able to do that. Yeah. So, but great question. Yes, masks a big hindrance for these kids. So now we're gonna head into preschool. So our preschool, a typical class, rotates in and out of a small group and a large group. And small group means 2 to 3 kids, typically with 1 teacher. So very low ratios. And they are focusing on the language pieces, syntax, speech, what they're saying, auditory, what they're hearing, vocabulary, and we do have academics as well. So in the small group, it's heavy listening and language. And then when they go to the larger group where could be 6 to 12 kids, that is allowing them to practice that language in a larger group, less structured. so that we can begin to hear and see, are they making the connections in the small group into the large group? Are they able to use that language in a natural way without a lot of support from the teacher? So that's typical. We did talk about the P1 classroom, which we was our focus in the grant ask, is that P1 where lower language, they're in the classroom all together all day, and they do not go in and out of this small and large group setting. So this in the preschool, both P1 and what we call P2 and P3, they're here 5 days a week. They're in class from 8:30 to 3 every day. They do have a half-hour snack and recess in the morning, and they have an hour lunch and recess in the middle of the day. But we're still focused on language. Like, we take every opportunity to support them talking and listening, and us supporting them through that. So even at lunch, when they're asking for help to open their Jell-O, you would hear a teacher saying, "Oh, what do you want to ask me?" And open Jell-O, and they may say, "Oh, open my Jell-O," and get them to say it back. So those kids are working really hard all day, every day. And so now Kristen's daughter Harper is in the preschool, and this will be her last year with us. So Kristen, can you tell us, like, what is it about the preschool that has really solidified it for you?
When we were looking at other schools, for Harper, granted, she did have, a speech issue and was speech delayed. It was I always kept pulling myself back to Desert Voices and the structure, the small ratio, the intense almost one-on-one throughout the day, because we're able to keep our ratio so low, that the progress that she and all these kiddos can make in such a small time is amazing, because we can focus on so many of the little details that some of other kids may not have an opportunity to be exposed to. She just the what she learns is, I feel, so far and above, because even though these kids may have a hearing loss, they're not treated as if they have a hearing loss. We're teaching them the exact same way we would teach a typical hearing kid. She gets the benefits of that, but the concepts that they're learning, the academics that they're learning, I've just, it was, the pandemic has hurt a lot of people. In my case, I benefited from it because my daughter got to attend here, and I got to go through the program because her school closed. So it'll be really hard for me to mainstream, because now I'm going into a big classroom, and you don't get that one-on-one setting. Even though it's not one-on-one, the instruction feels like it is, because it is so, it's very structured and very targeted for each kid.
Yeah. So we're going to take a peek inside the 2 settings for preschool.
Stand it up. Okay, put it on your paper. Whoa, I like it. Okay, Sadie, you ready? What would you like? Do you want another straw? Do you want? Oh, tell me.
Another straw.
You want another straw for your pumpkin? I want another straw
I want another straw.
for my pumpkin.
Boom.
Another straw for your pumpkin.
No.
Do you need more?
Yeah.
I heard you. You need more?
Yeah.
Do you want another straw?
No.
No?
Yeah. Apple.
Oh, do you want a straw?
Yeah.
Like Sadie? Straw.
So,
I want
apple.
straw.
So you can even see the difference between those 2 kids and what their language levels are, and how the teacher is supporting them differently. So the first little girl, she can put together more words into a sentence, and Abby was able to chunk the whole sentence into bigger pieces for her, and she was able to repeat it back. Whereas the little boy doesn't have quite as much language and vocabulary, And Abby adjusted that to get him to just say 3 words instead of that 7 or 10 that the little girl was using. So this is our small group instruction for these kiddos. And if you can think back to the baby sitting in the high chair, not saying anything and just alerting to sound. Now we've come forward. These two are just over the age of 3. So in 3 years, this is the type of progress that we've made.
So they started in your program
Early
as
on.
babies.
Yeah.
And so for the preschool kids, that's included in your count of 31.
Yeah.
current students.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many kids are in the preschool class?
16 right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're almost split down the middle between those
Got it.
earlier kids and the preschool kiddos.
Okay.
And I can add the little girl, she started in parent coaching. So typical baby, identified early, attended all programs. The other little boy, now, yes, he started in parent coaching, but he was a little older when he started with us. So you can see they are about the same age. What the benefits of someone who is fortunate enough to be diagnosed early, amplified early, and find our services early is, I mean, like you just said, she's, already putting 7 to 10 word sentences together.
So now we're going to see the large group and see what they're up to in the discovery room.
1, 2, 3. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August, September, October, November, December. These are the months of the year. Joseph, what month is it right now? Yeah, you're right. Do you know what that says? Yeah, turn around and tell your friends about the month. It's September, but not for very long.
So in the discovery room, it does probably look more like a preschool that we're used to, where they're practicing the months, the days of the week. But there still is a focus on language. You heard her asking him to repeat back, to tell his friends. So that's the discovery room. Something really exciting that's happening for us this year is we have that P1 classroom that you've read about in our grant proposal. We were anticipating that a couple of those kids would be ready to transition into a P2 classroom in probably around April of this school year. But Kristen and I just found out from our programs manager that actually those kids are progressing faster than we expected, and they're going to be able to transition into P2 right after Thanksgiving. So those intense, direct, targeted services really, really do make a huge difference. So we're all super excited for those 2 little boys that'll get to transition after Thanksgiving. So more questions. You've been great asking them throughout. Really appreciate that, slowing me down and stopping me. But any other additional questions or clarifications?
Yeah. So can you talk through just specifically what the grant money would be used for?
Yeah.
I know we keep talking about the P1 class, but let's just
So when you provide services, what the grant can provide is 1, scholarships for those families. We have 5 kids in that class. 2 are going to transition out. So that leaves 3 still in the classroom, but we also enroll kids all year round. We're on a roll. It's like, if you don't get in August, you don't get to come until the next year. Nope. If you come to us tomorrow, we're going to figure out a way to get you in as soon as possible. So 1 would be scholarships for those kiddos. Also materials. What you didn't get to see is we're not using typically pictures. We're actually using real manipulatives for kids. So like when Kristen was talking about push the red car, then we're going to make sure we have a red car that child gets to push up the slide. So it's materials for the classroom. all of our listening and spoken language professionals here are highly educated and qualified. So they go through a master's level program in order to be qualified to teach in a setting like this. And then we also ask them to work on additional certifications afterwards. So they may have a master's, but then you can spend another 3 years getting your what we call LISL certification. So yes, the cost of the program is expensive, but the outcomes that we are able to provide for these children really does set them up to be in a mainstream classroom with typical hearing peers with very few additional needs, which is a benefit to school districts as well. So all of our kids at age 3 are on IEPs, individual educational plans. Oftentimes, families come back to us worried because the district is saying your child does not qualify for an IEP anymore. That's scary for a family because the supports are going away, but we have to work with those families to convince them this was the ultimate goal, right? You wanted your kid to be in a typical classroom with typical hearing kids. So what this means is they're doing really, really well, and they're going to take off. They're going to have an amazing educational career. Specifically, the grant would support that classroom where the kids are coming to us late. They need even more individualized instruction, even more intense instruction in order to close that gap as quickly as we can so that we can get them into that P2 classroom and get them on a path to mainstreaming as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Did you say your total enrollment you're looking that you can go up to is, did I hear 70?
Yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, we currently don't have the staff for 70.
Mhm.
We have made adjustments for that. But yes, in the past with our brick and mortar, like our buildings, we have enough classrooms where we have comfortably had 70 kids in the program. And that is across programs. That's parent coaching, Jumpstart, toddler, and preschool. Probably the high in preschool has been 45-ish. Yeah.
So realistically, if you look at 2022, what would you
Yeah.
anticipate seeing? So you're at 31 now, 16 in preschool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what would you look like that P1 classroom to look like through?
Yeah. So I think realistically, if we can find professionals, we're already recruiting for next school year. It would be really wonderful to have 2 professionals in that classroom and be able to have 6 kids in that class. If we only have 1 professional in that classroom, they really only could do 3 kids at a time, maybe 4, depending on the additional needs of the kiddos. But we've had years where we easily could have had 2 P1 classrooms because there were that many children that had come to us late identified, low language.
Right.
So
Got it. So this 50,000 is for the P1 classroom, correct?
Yeah.
Specifically? Okay.
mhm,
Got it.
yes, yeah. And with those 2 kids moving on, it really does open up additional spaces for any kids that come to us throughout the year, and would allow us to, be able to hire that additional professional when we find them.
Is it hard to find people?
It is hard to find people because all of our teachers are teachers of the deaf. That is what their master's level degree is in.
Mhm.
There is a teacher of the deaf teacher shortage across the nation. There aren't very many universities that provide that type of master's level program. So they are in high demand and they're hard to find. So we're always looking for those teachers of the deaf. Yeah.
Great. I think that's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you
Yes,
so
me
much.
too. Me too.
Thank you, you
Yeah.
guys did. It was an awesome presentation.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. And loved the little video, the snips that we got to see. So thank you.
Sure,
We
sure.
appreciate it.
Of course. Well, we just want to say thank you for supporting us in the past. Thank you for giving us another opportunity to learn more about us. So thank you.
Of course.
you.
Of course. Thank you. Have
Thanks
a
for your
good day,
time.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.